Very excited to be able to welcome our next guest to Off the Podium today. Bit of a stellar resume, just a few things I need to read out here on his CV, particularly Commonwealth Games earlier this year at the time of recording this. A couple of medals, 4 to be precise, 2 gold, 2 silver. World Championships this year as well, a gold and a silver. For this program, the one that stands out, of course, the most, Olympic champion in the 200-metre breaststroke, as well as a bronze medalist in the 4x100-metre mixed medley. And on top of those medals, the Olympic record holder in the 200-metre breaststroke and the world record holder in the 200-metre breaststroke, the first man to ever swim under 2 minutes and 6 seconds. This man loves to swim and he does very well at it. It's a pleasure to welcome to the show the one, the only, Mr. Zac Stubblety-Cook. Zac, first of all, welcome to the show. You're the first person to get a round of applause on the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure.
It's very exciting. And I should have mentioned it's time to go gobbledygook for Zac Stubblety-Cook, just because I'm sure you never get that after the Olympics, right? That has never followed you around since Basil said those words.
Yeah, as long as everyone has a crack, right? As long as my name's out there, it's kind of nice,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I also found out in the lead up to this interview that we've all been saying your name wrong. It's not Zac Stubblety-Cook, it's Zac Stubblety-Cook. So we've got to pronounce the L right.
Yeah, you got to try and have a crack at the L, but each to their own. Like it is nice to hear my name pronounced correctly, but at the same time, it's just part of it, right? It's a name that no one forgets.
Exactly. Well, I stand by. I think you've got maybe the best name on the Australian Olympic team because it's a name that you remember and it just rolls off the tongue. And I love a good commentary name so that you can just roll it off the tongue. Zac Stubblety-Cook, like it fits everything, right? And I think that is where someone like Basil Zemplis can have a lot of fun with that and just sit on the words gobbledygook until you win the gold medal.
Yeah. And, it's also nice as well. Like mum's a home ec teacher, so she gets Mrs. Cook, which if you ever need to shorten it, it's not like they're both too complicated words.
Exactly. And then also, again, you got the first name beginning with the letter Z. So like you've got great initials, which I'm sure are very unique as well. So like ZSC, I don't think many people in school had those. So if you ever had somebody like carve into a desk, like I heart ZSC, you know who they're talking about, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit unique, right?
Yeah, it ticks all the boxes. But Zac, I'm always intrigued how you get into the sport because most Australians we grow up swimming. I think we have to. We're basically born. We're thrown in water. But most of us, I don't think, go to the Olympics and win gold medals in them. So how do you take going swimming as a child to eventually turning this into a sport that you've pursued professionally?
So for me, personally, I actually was afraid of the water. So I remember mum taking me kicking and screaming to learn to swim, as every Australian learns to swim, and especially up here in Queensland, it's a little bit different. Everyone learns to swim because you go to the beach growing up. So for me, that's what it was always about. It was always about water safety when I was quite young, and then I was very lucky to go to a primary school where we had a pool and a swim club. So all of a sudden, all my friends from primary school, year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4, it was all of a sudden they were all swimming, and I was like, well, I've got to overcome this fear. So I can still remember, I think it was year 1, I was about 6 years old, and I did the half lap back then, and that was with a senior school member or senior club member. So that was someone in year 7 or 8 who would then basically hold us to halfway down the pool. I remember closing my eyes because I was so scared and then ending up hitting the other end of the pool. And it was a 25-metre pool back then. So, yeah, I remember swimming that. And then the rest is kind of history. The next few years I kept swimming and kept developing my skills as a very young athlete. And then I had the opportunity in 2009 as a 10-year-old, very lucky to have parents that supported me to go all the way to Perth to swim 42 seconds, a 50-metre breaststroke, and waited a whole week to swim that one swim. And now, I've been very lucky with the opportunities I've been presented in the sport from my schooling at Churchie to, being able to swim with the senior group as a still junior developing, that being through Vince Valley, my current coach. So I've been very lucky over the years, but it has taken a little bit of hard work and dedication. Obviously goes into that, but yeah, I've had very good opportunities along the way.
It's a fascinating story to think that it was just a fear of something that basically that led you to that. That's incredible. And then have the supportive parents, as you said, to kind of take you on a bit of a trip, because that's not exactly a short trip from Queensland to Perth, is it? That's basically as far as you can go pretty much anywhere in Australia from one end to the other.
Yeah. So that was a great trip, and back then as well, we actually had state championships in Cairns, of all places too. So it wasn't like it was just one trip either. It was multiple trips just to be able to even get to Perth. And, I think mum grew up playing tennis and dad grew up in Victoria playing AFL and rugby. So we were never born for the water, but, the background wasn't necessarily there. But I think they supported me and they continue to support me in whatever endeavour I have. And that's something that I'm really grateful for.
Did you play other sports? Sort of mentioning what your parents did, sort of outside of swimming. Were you much, doing a lot of activities in different other sports as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a big advocate for a person-first approach. So I think up until I was the age of 14, I played soccer, water polo throughout all those years. And I thoroughly enjoyed those two sports. And I think I always say to people, I look back at, probably when I was edging on high school, it was 50-50 between water polo and swimming. I really enjoyed the camaraderie of a team sport that was water polo, and the ability to play and swim as well. Like, it was kind of the best of both worlds. And then moving on from there, I think the opportunity arose to go to the school I went to for swimming. So that kind of cemented the beginning of my swimming career as a more senior athlete.
Did you have ambitions for the Olympics? Was it something that you watched as a kid and thought this would be something I'd like to go to, or did that sort of come the more you progress in your swimming career?
For me, like, probably as I started to go through high school, I always wanted to represent the country in whatever state that was. That was always the goal. And I think, like, as you progress in the sport, you realize that is the pinnacle of some sports, not all sports, but in swimming, it's definitely the pinnacle. Like world champs is probably second to that. And Pan Pacs and Com Games are on a similar level as well, depending on the event. So for me, representing a country was always my goal. And to get the best out of myself was simply the goal always, and always continues to be the goal. That's regardless of the results or anything like that. It's just about challenging myself day in, day out. But that's probably more broad to what you're talking about, I guess, is like, yeah, there was an Olympic dream, but I guess it was ignited probably watching the Rio Olympics more so. I think when I was a bit younger, I didn't have a full appreciation of what it was to be an Olympian and why it was so significant. Yeah.
I do love aging me on this show, Zach, when you say, oh yeah, the Rio Olympics, that was the first one. I just won't mention that I remember watching Barcelona many years before you were born. So we'll skip past that one. I'm always intrigued with swimmers though, how they choose their strokes, because I believe you are the first breaststroker we've had on this show. And I guess out of all the strokes, I feel that's the one that maybe gets the least amount of attention for unfair reasons. We can talk about that. But was it just a simple case of you gave them all a crack and that was the one that you ended up finding you were best in?
Yeah, I mean, they say breaststrokers are born, not made. And they say breaststrokers are a little bit weird compared to the rest of them. So maybe that's why we don't get as much publicity. But for me personally, I always enjoyed breaststroke and enjoyed the technicality of it. I'm a big process person, so I like the finer details and there's throughout swimming, it's always, but breaststroke's unique in that it's definitely the least efficient stroke. Even fly is a little bit more efficient if you're technically really good at it. Breaststroke just lends itself because you don't actually come out of the water at all. You are swimming entirely through the water. So for me, that's probably more senior athlete that I am now, see the value and joy in that. But earlier on, I think I definitely swam everything, like some fly, back, breast, probably not so much back, but definitely freestyle and butterfly. and definitely a lot of medley when I was younger, and probably slowly phased that out over the last few years. Like, I still was racing the occasional 2 med at a meet, or the occasional 200 medley at a state championship. So for me, and that's something that definitely advocate for younger swimmers, is do everything, because it's fun. Like, I remember, I think it was year 7, so I was 12 years old. I was racing butterfly, freestyle, breaststroke, and medley. So I was racing as much as I could, and it definitely is a lot of value as you move through your career.
Is it a sport, you're talking about the technicalities of it, is it the most, I guess, the fine-tuned nature of it? Is it the one stroke that you can really work on it on a level which maybe you can't on freestyle, backstroke, and butterfly, on just finding that time based on that technique? I'm sure you can do it on all of them, but I mean, to me, breaststroke doesn't necessarily seem purely about the speed, if that makes sense. Of course, you want to go fast, but more of the technique around it rather than just get in the water and go for. I'm probably explaining that really badly, Zach. Please shut me down here. But I'm guess I'm asking the technical nature of it. Is it something more attuned to, if you're fixing up a car, you can be more technical on a car with breaststroke than you could be with freestyle? That is the worst question I've ever asked, Zach. Please completely skip over that if you want to.
I mean, it's more probably geared towards the efficiency piece. So it's like, I guess, in freestyle, you have a lot of technique and a lot of technical ability. But the caveat to that is you occasionally see a freestyler get through to a World Championships finals purely on power.
That's the word I was looking for, power. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yes.
So I guess, like, it's just different in that regard. It's not any better or worse or more technical, I don't think, but it's just different in that regard, that it is least efficient, so you can race it all differently. So there's a technical aspect there in terms of, if you have more power, typically those guys race faster front ends and a little bit slower back ends. But of course you have outliers to those rules. But for me, I'm more of probably aerobic athlete. So for me, I'm definitely more geared towards finding that speed in between and finding that efficient point where you're not descending speed as much as, say, a power hungry athlete.
Which then you mentioned that you're sort of born into it, you don't become one. So it's sort of a stroke that I can imagine that if all of a sudden, you know, you get a few years into your career and you want to try a challenge, that you're not going to maybe find too many freestylers would switch to breaststroke sort of, you know, years into their career, if that's something they haven't really focused on too much.
Yeah, and partly that's because typically, like your high end breaststroke, we have weird hips and weird knees and ankles. So like, there's a couple of ways you can achieve, I guess, the most efficient stroke. So for example, someone like Adam Peaty, he has really good ankle and hip flexibility, but his real strength is through his back. His lower lumbar spine is like quite flexible. But then you take someone like Liesl Jones, and her hip mobility, like there's photos of it, it's like, on paper, physio goes like, oh, that's just insane that she can get into that position, let alone then have power to apply in that position. So there's different ways of achieving it as well. So, but that's probably where the fact that freestylers don't swap over, that's typically why. Sometimes you get a bit of crossover in butterfly because it is a similar muscle group in the upper body, but that's probably more on the sprint side and less on the 100 and 200 side.
So that, I can imagine then the breaststrokers in a gym are doing different exercises to the freestyler. So basically, if you're at a swimming gym, then you can tell maybe who's a breaststroker versus who's a freestyler. Yeah,
definitely. And I think, like, I mean, personally, I think a lot of what we do is the same, but it's probably more, you need to focus a little bit more on legs, etc. For me personally, like, it's definitely more leg drive. My upper body doesn't matter too much, whereas sometimes, especially freestylers, lend themselves more to an upper body dominant stroke. So there's that balance. I think as well, though, the caveat to that is that until you're in the high end, like, it's pretty general what you do in the gym, because you're simply just trying to complement what you're doing in the pool.
You mentioned that progression sort of when you sort of started focusing on it and everything. I mean, when your parents obviously on board with you and you say to them, Mum, Dad, this is what I want to do. They're taking you to Perth. They're taking you to Cairns. Is it a hard conversation to have, like, if you like, this is what I'm growing up to be? Because obviously a lot of us want to grow up and be an athlete, and realistically we don't always make it. So do they sort of have to sit you down and go, Zach, we're going to support you. We'll do this. But, what else do you want to do? Like, or are they fully on board of like, no, you are going to be a swimmer. We will support you. It's this or nothing.
Probably a bit of both. I mean, I had some really good mentors, especially when I got to high school, that gave me that perspective of like, you can't just be an athlete. Your athletic career probably lasts, if you're lucky, till you're 30. If you're happy and content with what you achieve before you're 26, a lot of people retire around that age. So it's an interesting one because you have till you're 26, and then you've got 60 odd years of working. So what are you going to do for the rest of that? And my personal opinion is, you are a person first, and that's probably first and foremost. And if you align your values with everything you do in your life, that's when you find your groove both in the pool and out of the pool, in whatever you're doing. So for me personally, like, I'm a big person for like my values of, hard work and determination, but also caring for others and trying to see the best out of them, is something that I'm really, really passionate about. So for me personally, like, those are the things that I try and align myself with both in and out of the pool in all activities I'm doing. So I was working pre-Olympics, but there's a lot of other moving parts now that come with post-Olympics and post-World Champs and all of the above, which I'm still not used to yet. So doing things like this, I'm still like not super comfortable doing, but I do enjoy doing them and having a chat, and especially this longer form stuff where you do get to have a bit more in-depth stuff.
So I can imagine it's all about routine. I mean, swimming, you're up early, you're swimming laps. It's a routine, right? You've got a training routine, which then I can imagine if you're that way inclined transfers into your life, what you're talking about. And is it sort of, are you a routine-based guy? Like, this is what you live your life on? Or is it sort of a case of, well, I am in the pool, but outside of it, it doesn't sometimes translate into other things?
A bit of both. I think, like, when I find passions, it's all or nothing for me. So for me, I have passions of one of my passions is mental health and looking after my mental health. And that's probably come through some bad experiences of swimming also, and not having that balance, but also, getting the best out of others and educating others on my experiences, helping them learn from those experiences. Definitely passion for coffee and cooking and baking and all of those things. So, and all of them are process driven things too. So I find myself, that's something I thrive on. Rules and process is like when there's a set parameter of how to do something or what to do in certain situations, that's when I thrive. The best example of that was we're in Sabadell, just outside Barcelona. And we had 2 weeks where a lot of people were getting sick after World Champs, which is typical. But we also then had no real structure. We could train kind of whenever we wanted. We could gym whenever we wanted, all of those things, and meals weren't provided. So we were eating out all the time. And like, I couldn't put my finger on why I was stressed at the time, but I was really like worked up and just a bit on edge, and not necessarily in a bad way, just like felt scattered. I remember then we went into Chartres. That's just about an hour train ride out of Paris. And we came together as a team again, and Commonwealth Games team came in, and all of a sudden I just completely relaxed and trained better. And it was all because all of a sudden meals were at a certain time. We were all back in a routine. Like, we were all training at the same time. And like, I was like, I didn't realize like how much I loved and thrived off structure and routine. So
wow,
for me, it's been an interesting year of self-reflection in that regard.
Fantastic. Good to sort of learn about that. And trust me, we're going to ask about coffee. That's a big question I need to find out about. When you were 16, you had a tumor in your shoulder, which obviously set you back a little bit there. I mean, what was that like at such a young age discovering that, and kind of what was that process like to get from discovery to, I guess, eventually recovery to getting back in the pool?
For me, it was, if I'm honest, it was a real testing point, I guess. I've had a few times in my life where I've been tested on whether I want to really do this. I think at the moment I'm probably going through something similar. It's just a phase in your life where, for me, that's something where I reflect on, where I had two options. I had the option of stopping, and that was it, and just swimming out the rest of my high school years, and then kind of not continuing, or giving it a red hot crack and giving it all I could, and putting my best foot forward in that sport and seeing what happened. So for me, I actually gave myself a timeline, said if I'm not on the senior team by the time I'm 21, that's it. And that was for me about an age where you start to develop as a senior, but then you also still have enough time to get out uni by the time you're 25 and still have a good career in that regard, and still be young enough to get going there. So for me, that's what happened. And at that same time, another spanner in the works was I'd just chosen to do a three-year senior at school. So it was to split my 11 and 12 over 3 years. So that meant an extra year at school. So I'd also had this other thought where I was deciding about that. And then with this diagnosis, it was really like, all right, well, I need to put my best foot forward if I'm going to do this right. So for me, that meant basically a week after surgery, I was sitting on a bike for the next 3 weeks, every day, morning and night, just to maintain fitness. And as soon as I could lift my arm up again, which was about 3 weeks after surgery, I was in the pool just slowly getting the strength back and slowly doing it. And then, I wasn't expecting much a year later going into Olympic trials, and didn't get much of a result, but it was a great experience to have a first Olympic trials, and something that really prepared me going into 2021.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously all of that coming at you at such a young age. I mean, I imagine it helps you mature a little bit, making all these decisions at 16. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was different. I mean, if I look back on it, I was probably making a lot of the decisions through parents, and also intuitively. I think personally, I'm a very old soul. I don't find myself craving a lot of what other young people crave, but for me, I think I've always been an old soul, and something that was quite intuitive. But at the time, and only looking back on it, I actually realized the gravity of the whole situation. That was a make or break situation for me. Didn't know what was going to happen going into surgery, didn't know actually what the tumor was until after it was removed, which was lucky it was benign. But at the time, I remember mum coming home, mum crying, and I'm not realizing why, not fully comprehending what was actually going on. But it all happens, and all happens for a reason. And I'm lucky that, I had the support around me, had not just from parents, but from family and friends that were, in the younger cohort as well, and swimming people. And and I'm definitely better off for it. I would do it again if that's what it meant.
The experience, I can imagine, of being in Olympic trials for 2016 and then going to a Commonwealth Games at 2018 as well, all sort of things on that journey you were mentioning. But how important were those two meets in the grand scheme of things to help you towards what you obviously had a pretty breakout year a few years later? Were they very important for sort of that development?
Absolutely. I think they teach you that it's not just talent, and it's more than that. And then I think probably not just those two meets taught me a lot, but moving to a squad where at the time we had Jess Hanson, Jack McLaughlin, and a few others, where they were all senior athletes, all been on a senior team since 2014, some of them, and a bronze at a world championships, Jess was. And so I got to see what that was like at 17, what it took to be an Olympian and be an Olympic medalist. And that's what I'm really grateful for. I saw day in, day out how hard they pushed and how relentless they were. And then to see how they prepared at a meet and how relaxed they would go in. And then I think 2018, we can probably touch on a bit more and dive in a bit more, because it wasn't the best experience for me, and something that probably was the turning point in my senior swimming career. I was lucky to have it at the beginning. To give...
Well, just if you want to go into that, what was it about that experience that sort of made it not so good?
I mean, I'd been training with Vince for 2 years and just narrowly missed the senior team in 2017. And a guy I'd raced my whole kind of age group career, which Matt Wilson, he made the senior team the first time that year. So it was also different because I thought I'd been working hard enough to get on the senior team. But in hindsight, I probably only would have raced one race. I got to go to the World Juniors and race half a dozen times, if not more. Similar program to what I'm racing now at a World Juniors. So it was a really great experience. But then a year on, like, I really wanted to get on the senior team for the first time. And I remember trials was okay. Like, it was a bit touch and go. It definitely wasn't what I was capable of. So I was a bit iffy there. And I didn't realize how important the mental component was going into Commonwealth Games, and tried to get other people's mindsets. And looking back now, that probably wasn't the best idea, but I got to Commonwealth Games, and I remember the heat of the 2 breast was day 1, session 1. So first day, like, it was easy because we could line up the taper right on to day 1. And we got there. I was swimming really well the few weeks beforehand, swimming fast at the pool. My times probably indicated like a 2:08 maybe, which would put me in the mix for a medal. So I was really excited and probably got overexcited in that regard. And when you go into a village, it's overwhelming the first time you do. And there's lots to do. Like, you can go to the bar, you can go get your hair cut, you can go to the shop, you can go to an arcade, like, you can go to the food hall 24 hours a day. Like, it's incredible, like, how different a village environment is. And then the buzz of everyone coming into the village is also another thing, where you have all the energy of all the different countries and all the different people all of a sudden there, and that's their dream as well, to be there. So they're all excited as well, and you have this energy of the village. And for me, I don't think I took stock of how much energy that was. And I got to the race and I mentally exhausted myself. I'd swum the race over and over again. And I remember diving in and just being physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, and not being able to, and being quite overwhelmed. And I remember very distinctly, like, looking up at the grandstands either side and being like, wow, like, this is a moment I want to take hold of. I think then the mental exhaustion kicked in and I was overworked. And so for me, after that experience, I missed the final, went about, I think, a 2:15. So to give anyone listening context, it was about 4 or 5 seconds over my best.
Nearly 10 seconds slower than your current best then. Wow, that's insane.
Yeah. So I knew I was capable of a lot more, and so did my coach. And after that, I didn't really want to swim. I was like, well, I've made a senior team. I've done what I wanted to do. And but I knew I was capable of more, and I knew that I'd probably regret if I didn't do it. But, you know, there was a good period, like a month there, where I was really depressed, like, you know, and I sought help and got help, but I hated the water. I hated being around the pool, and I hated, like, training, and I didn't want to push myself. I didn't want to do anything. And that's when, you know, I decided to myself, like, I needed to find a psych, and worked with that psych for still to this day. And we worked really well together, and worked on the balance and worked on the person first approach, and led me to shifting my, like, I guess, non-swimming career to something more suited, like business and psychology, moving, you know, my mental state. And, you know, we got to Pampact 3 months later, and I swam a 2:07.9. So
bit of an improvement. Yeah.
7 seconds faster. I was like 0.5 over the Australian record at that time. So
wow, it
was a big shift, and faster than Matt. At the time, it was the fastest textile suit swim by an Australian ever. So not anymore, but probably get into that. But yeah, like for me, that was like proof in the pudding that I could do it and I could continue to push myself, and that what we were doing is working. Because the hardest thing I think in sport like swimming is that you get 3 opportunities a year to test yourself at a race, that all your training for the last 3 months is worth it, is working. And, it's a stark contrast to a technical game, say like tennis, like a similar technique wise game where you can test it every other week.
Yeah.
Under pressure.
There's always some sort of tour game basically, isn't there, going on every week?
So for us, it's just a little bit different, and it's not a bad thing. I can never view it as a bad thing. It's just different. But for me at that point in time, it was quite testing because I didn't know whether it was working. But then to have that Pan Pac success and get a silver medal, in a 2:07.9, it was really special, and probably, if I'm honest, like one of the highlights of my career to be able to turn it around in 3 months from being depressed and hating the water to swimming that well. Some would probably look at it as a bit of kick in the guts because I would have won Commonwealth Games 3 months earlier with that time. But, that taught me a really, really important lesson that you need to have everything right. Not necessarily everything right, but like I'm careful to say that, but like I guess everything you can have right, your controllables right.
And sort of be able
to get the best out of yourself.
Have that ability to at least work on it if you can't. Because I mean, that's an incredible story, because if you had won the gold at the Commonwealth Games, who knows what might have happened in the future if you didn't sort of have that situation where you've kind of almost hit rock bottom to fix certain things that have ultimately led on to a pretty handy couple of years at the time of speaking. You mentioned that obviously seeing a psychologist. Is a sports psychologist? Is this kind of just a regular one? Like, and sort of, is that a case of, because I know generally when you find a psychologist, it can be very hit and miss. You see one, you go back and that. Was it a case of you doing that, or you just got connected to one straight away and that sort of person has stuck with you ever since?
I guess for me, when I was like at that point, I had another friend a close friend of mine who was seeing a psych, and I actually couldn't get into her, but I could get into her, not assistant, but like one of her employees at the firm. So I was like, if she's really good and he's really enjoying her because we're similar personalities, I'm sure like he'll be all right. And I think I can still remember very distinctly, like our first session went in and I was like, I'm a process person. I need this, this, and this. Like, I don't want to walk out of here feeling better, but then feel crap in a couple of days. Like, I would love to walk out of here with like tangible things to do. And still to this day, like he always gives me homework or things to do continually. And like I said to him, I gave him all those kind of parameters of my personality quite up front. I think that was something we connected really well over. And he was just a clinical psych. Now he's working more in the sports psych space. But for me, at the time, I was more probably concerned about my life outside of swimming, because there's a lot of underlying things that probably were coming through in swimming and coming through as pressure in swimming, and this ultimate feeling of never being good enough or never being satisfied, regardless of the result. So for me, I probably still have that feeling, which is good and bad, but as long as I know the feelings are there, it's probably ultimately led to where I am today, like the feeling of never being good enough or never satisfied. But it's always, it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
I can imagine, but I'm always so fascinated on this show to learn about that mental aspect of sport, because I can sit here and think, well, the physical side of training is obviously very important to help you win that gold medal. But as we're seeing more and more now, that mental side of things has always been a part of it, but obviously a lot more people are open to talk about it. They're a lot more happy to sort of mention there might be an issue and get that assistance with it, which, I mean, in your case, clearly, as we just discovered, obviously was a little bit of a help towards where you are at today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like something I'm really grateful to be able to even talk about openly, and it's something that I wish, especially young males, probably as they transition out of high school, I think there's a lot more of them that struggle than people realize. And that's something I think people shouldn't be afraid of, because everyone has issues, and everyone, and whenever they're ready, that's the main thing too. Like, sometimes you need to recognize, I'm not ready to fully unpack that, and that's okay. But realize that, it is healthier to unpack it than let it fester. But I think, in those key moments where you do transition through life, like the worst day is the worst day you've ever had. Like, it's all relative. Like, someone's family member passing versus someone's, dog dying is the same feeling. Like, it's regardless, because that's the worst thing they've ever experienced.
Yeah.
So I think that's also something people need to take a step back and realize, is that, like, I think we have this mentality as young males, but also as Australians, that, just get up and work harder and do it again. So that's something that I think is really important as well to realize.
Which, I mean, obviously get back to the swimming, but so clearly this is something that you're very passionate about, Zac, that I can imagine that I'm sure you might be doing it now, but even sort of on a post-swimming career, this is something I can see you really advocating for, sort of going out there. Maybe if you're talking to schools or, young swimmers, that it's obviously, sure, I've had this great success on the physical side and the winning the gold medals, but let's take a focus on your mental health and realize how important that is as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, it's something that I've spoken to, my former school a bit about, and definitely try and bring up whenever I have longer form interviews as well, to get that out there as well. So, I think sometimes everyone just wants to hear about the success, but there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Like, even, you would think that post achieving your goal, you would think, you're all happy and merry and it's great, but by the same token, like, I probably had similar feelings after Tokyo. Like, probably, the 3-4 months after, till the end of the year after the Olympics, it was great. But then after that, you go, oh shit, like, what's next? And then you have this, I had this feeling of, like, dissociation from personality, I guess, and not knowing exactly who I was, and kind of probably getting caught in the, I am who I am, and I'm defined by my Olympic success, or I'm defined by that success. And partly, I'm always will be, but also, like, I think I have to realize that, that's not all of me. And I'm still trying to find that balance probably after the Olympics, because, pre-Olympics, I was completely under the radar. I was working, studying, just minding my own business and training day in, day out. And then suddenly, like, you put it on the map and you're like, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we put your face here? Can we do a photo shoot? Yeah. And you're just like, oh, okay. And then, like, suddenly people are telling you, how amazing it is. It's like, yeah, it was pretty cool. But, like, that's not all I am, like, yeah. I think somewhere along the line, probably after the Olympics, I lost sight of that. Not humbleness, but, like, it's interesting to describe, like, the personality that I had pre-Olympics, and then learning how I can integrate those things into my life and what my non-negotiables are again, has been quite an interesting experience, and probably something that I haven't quite perfected yet. But we'll get there.
I feel like I need to scrap the next 10 questions, Zac, and all of a sudden we can just talk about your other things. I mean, yeah, Olympic gold, sure, that was great, but what music do you like? Shall we just go with that? I feel we're on that path. In all seriousness, like, have you thought about doing maybe a podcast or sort of a blog or some sort of, like, even YouTube or something? Because I think, like, what I'm getting from that is that that's something that, yeah, people look at you as Zac Stubblety-Cook, the Olympic champion, the world record holder, and that's why we've got you on the show today, but there is a lot more to it. So, I mean, is that something that you've kind of maybe thought about doing?
Yes and no. I've always thought about a podcast, but I think, like, my reluctancy is that it is a risk and it's a time factor for me. So it's also, like, that's the hardest thing, I think. Like, I have little time. So for me, weighing up the priorities, like, what is the priority? Like, do I need to finish uni before I finish swimming, which has always been my goal, but I don't know if I'll get there. We'll see. So, like, things like that, like, I think that's the last month I've had off training. That's something that I've been reflecting on, like, what the priorities are and what I want to achieve over the next few years, and how do I integrate those things into my life. So for me, I'm actually doing a coffee roasting course, so we'll see where that lands after that. But yeah, I've thought about doing a podcast, and I know who I'd love to do it with, and he's just moved to Queensland, so we'll also watch that space.
We'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that. A coffee roasting podcast, perhaps, maybe as well, or
Maybe we'll see. Maybe a podcast over coffee.
yeah. Hey, exactly. There was, I think there's an AFL one, isn't it? Like talking footy over coffee or something like that. I think they've just started recently. So there's a few. What was the one that Jerry Seinfeld did? Wasn't it like drink comedians in
cars and coffee?
Yeah, something like that. That was clever. That was a good one. So yeah, with that, I mean, the lead up to Tokyo. We'll get back to swimming. We'll brush over this, Zach, and we'll get back to some more of those other ones if you like. Obviously, you get fourth in the World Champs in 2019. Then we've got a bit of a delay, and then things really start to take off for you 2021 onwards. Was the delay a positive for you? Or, I mean, it seemed to be in terms of your results, but I mean, was that ultimately, you think, a big help, and that maybe the success you've had post 2021 might not have come had the delay come in 2020?
Yes and no. I think I saw it as an opportunity to work on both the mental and physical side. I think being able to step away for a little bit and have a different stimulus, in that, I was very lucky that we were doing a lot of dryland stuff. Like, I had access to doing dryland stuff at home. So for me, that was a really good way to keep my mental health sane during that whole COVID period, but also have the time to work a bit more and do a bit more uni and those kind of things. So for me, I really enjoyed that time. It definitely helped me long term, and took a bit more, I guess, when you go into an Olympic year and all those kind of things, until you do it, you don't realize how much goes into it. It's at a world championship, you're in a Commonwealth Games year, there's pressure, there's always pressure, but the Olympics is different in that regard, that you go into every 4 years and go, you stand behind the blocks, Olympic trials, and you're like, this is what I've been working towards, and this is the first hurdle to even get to the Olympics. You want to ultimately make, my goal at the Olympics was to make a final. So working back from that, the pressure in the Olympic year is different. So I think that extended period actually gave us a little bit of room to breathe, if you will. Pardon the pun, but you do feel like you're constantly being pushed underwater, I guess, and that gave us a little bit of room to breathe, and I always saw it as an opportunity more than anything.
Which you get the trials in 2021, Commonwealth and national record, pretty good feeling to have. I always love hearing from swimmers about, is it more about the time or the position? Because obviously I've seen people win gold medals and they've been shitty because, oh, fuck, I swam a really slow race even though they got a gold medal, or they finished 8th, but they're thrilled because they broke their personal best. What is more important to a swimmer?
I think everyone's a little bit different. For me personally, it's about doing my best on the day, and that's it. That's the whole story. And I think probably that's why I'd say people have seen photos of world champs and Commonwealth Games where, well, probably more so world champs. I was world champion, and I was disappointed because I was I didn't do the best I thought I could on the day. Yeah. I think I got caught up in the pressure of it all. So for me, I swam faster in the semi-final, and at the end of the day, it was a race and I came out on top. But for me, I knew that wasn't the best I could give on the day, and I was disappointed in that way. So for me, it's probably more about my best. So it's probably in between what you just said. I guess is the easiest way. It's it's not necessarily you're not going to do PBs all the time, especially when you're in the 1% of the 1%. It's more about just ensuring you know your race plan and know what the best is on that day.
When it comes to the differences between a 100 and a 200 breast, it doesn't, at least sort of looking on some of the results, is there much people who can do both and are sort of top of the game of both? You mentioned Adam before, he's obviously doing well in the 100, you're doing well in the 200, put you in an 150 meter race, who's gonna come out on top? Is it that how the metrics are measured on it?
It would be interesting to, actually hopefully get the opportunity to train with him at the end of the year. So that'll be great. But he's changed the game of the 100, and I'd love to change the game of the 200, but we'll see what happens. But
You've done all right so far in that, Zach, just saying.
yeah, I think there's still more to give, but we'll see. It's just about doing my best, as we said before. But it's very interesting. We'll probably get into that, but like very interesting to go into new air and nuance, I guess. And that's something So for me, like the 100 to 200 is different. And in saying that, like I think Petey's one of those people that's actually forced that. He's pushed it to a level where it's difficult to do both at that level.
Which, how does he do that? What has he done that has made it difficult?
Well, I mean, I think he's just pushed where people didn't think possible, A, and B, that he's moved to a really high power stroke, like we talked about before. So probably he's still really efficient, and that's probably still the differential of him versus someone who's close to him, is that he's slightly more efficient, but he's really powerful. Like he's a very powerful, strong person. Whereas you look at like someone like Chupkov and myself, like he's got 15 kilos on us, like we're lean string beans compared to him. So there's that regard, and like our ability then to change gears and the easy speed is slightly different, I guess. So yeah, it's just a different race, and it's becoming more, I guess, like a 100 freestyle to a 400 freestyle. Like you don't typically see those people racing both. But I think in the future we will see more crossover as it progresses more and more, especially the 200. Hopefully as it comes down, I think there'll be more crossover because, your ability in the 200 is partly limited by how fast you can swim 100 meters because your typical range is, you have the ability to swim a certain speed with a certain efficiency, and that's dictated by how fast you can sprint, I guess, is in layman's terms. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I definitely understand that, which I've got to ask that question again, though. Who would win between you and Adam in 150? Like, is he just going to be tired after 100? He can't swim an extra 50?
Yeah, like I guess it would come down to the last 25, I think. I think he would really get out in front of me, and that would be his tactic. But if I could stay in touch, I think we'd have an interesting race, but I have no idea who. Because I've heard things like, what he could have done in training and stuff like that. But I don't, you don't know unless you know. So, you hear he can do quite a bit of endurance speed work as well. So you don't know. I don't know.
I'm picking you, Zach. I'm saying, and this is the one thing that's still weird for me is that there's actually English people out there who are good at swimming. This is our sport, England. Like, I mean, come on. Like, I mean, this is not meant to be, the Brits are not meant to be good at swimming. They can have everything else that they beat us in, not swimming. All right, I'm still weirded out.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. This is just, it's kind of strange with that. One thing I always love finding out from our guests is obviously that Olympic experience, everything that comes from outside of the competition, obviously a very unique games for Tokyo. But going back to your point about Gold Coast, the village life, all that kind of stuff that was overwhelming at that time, how much of a help was that, having gotten that maybe shock out of the system, to an Olympics, which obviously is a little bit bigger than a Commonwealth Games?
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot bigger. It's like about 10 times the size. So yeah, like to give you perspective, like we stayed at a uni campus for this Commonwealth Games. They built basically like a mini city.
Yeah.
Like, like I was just in Hobart, and any Hobart listeners, it's probably about like half the size of your city.
That's not hard.
That was the village.
I'm sure your house right now is probably about half the size of Hobart. Zach, it's all good.
Yeah. So like, it's just massive. Like I think we had 50 something thousand people in the Olympic Village, whereas I think the Commonwealth Games, I could be completely off, but I think it's like 10,000, if that, and that's including staff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's ridiculous. Like, there's 3 dining halls at the Olympics, and they're like all like double story giant things. It's like insane. So yeah, like it's just a different game. And I think like I was really lucky to have Commonwealth Games and having that experience. But on top of that, I think like I'm very quite close with Mac Horton, and like having him and his experience and rooming with him was really I think, vital to like my success. And I think like I'm very lucky that he took me under his wing and we bonded a lot over that experience and over other experiences as well. And I think we're both friends outside of the pool more than swimming. And I think that was something really, really important as well, that like he kind of nurtured me through the experience and reminded me why we were here and always brought me back to centre.
We had Mac on a couple months back now. Well, actually a lot longer, probably about a year ago now, if I'm actually doing the maths correctly. I loved learning about his love of hummus. Did he get you involved in his hummus love, and then you get him involved in your coffee love? Is it kind of like a nice mutual sharing of foods there?
He hasn't got me involved in the hummus, but he definitely got me involved with film photography. I think like I was into photography a bit beforehand.
Yes.
And then he introduced me to film and the nuance of film, and now I only shoot film and no digital camera.
Wow.
So, you know, but to be fair, I've also like converted him to filter coffee. Like he was very reluctant, but now he's all about it. Like I was at his place on Sunday and he had his filter set up and I was like, man, it's only taken me 2 years, but we got there.
Perfect. Who would you beat him in? Like, could he race you in breaststroke, do you think? Like,
no chance.
Well, like, would there be a middle? What's the middle ground then? Like, he's good at freestyle, you're good at breast. Like, do you just have to go in a backstroke race against each other to see who's like the ultimate champion or something like that?
I reckon we'd have a battle, either backstroke, butterfly, or a medley. I think medley could be the jam because, like, I think because he's quite a big guy, I reckon he could muscle through the fly and back.
Yep.
But the breast, then, you know, like I think it'd be a bit touch and go between us. I think it would be quite interesting.
I love these ultimate battle ideas. This needs to be more of a thing, like in swimming, you know? Like it's kind of just get it out there. Like, Thorpe and Phelps in the freestyle, whoop-de-doo. Make them do breaststroke. Let's see who the real champion is in between them, right? Like, come on, anyone can do freestyle. It's breaststroke's where it's at. Come on. That's what we want to see with it.
It would be interesting, some of those things.
There's your promoter's dream. just get him out there. Obviously, gold medal, not bad at the Olympics. Can you put into words that feeling? I always like asking this to find out if our Olympic champions can put it into words. And given now it's obviously been a bit over a year now that it's happened, I don't know if it's sort of your words might change now to when it ultimately happened in Tokyo.
I think it was like the ultimate proof that I could do my best race under immense pressure. And it's not about the medal. It's never been about winning or losing for me. I've been lucky that, you know, I've had success over the last 12 months, but I don't think it'll ever sink in because it means something different to everyone else. I think also that's something that I've learned over the last year, you know, to my school. It means, you know, they can take me out and show that, you know, you can have ultimate success going to this school. Or then it means what, you know, to my parents that they're so proud of me because I achieved a goal that I set out to do. Or to, you know, my partner, family and friends that they've gone, you know, it wasn't for nothing that he sacrificed a lot. You know, it means something different to each individual person who's been a part of that medal. Or that experience in general. So to me, it's all of those things plus so much more, and something that I don't think I could fully even comprehend, let alone put into words.
But it's fascinating when you're talking about life before and life after. And you said you set yourself a goal of making the finals, you do that, you win a gold. You get out of the pool, you got Channel 7, you got all these people interviewing, you've got all that. But like when you look at your phone for the first time, have you ever had a phone blow up? Like I can't imagine there's not like 1,000 notifications on your phone, whereas maybe a day before you might have had 5. I don't know. Like, I mean, did your phone survive that explosion of notifications?
Yeah, so the only other thing I can probably relate it to was the world record probably got a similar amount.
Nice.
Because that was everywhere as well. But yeah, it's different. I think like you don't know what to expect, but I actually had, at the Olympics, you get given a phone because Samsung's one of the sponsors. So all athletes get given a phone. So I had 2 phones and I had one phone that was for like mum, one of my close friends and my partner at the time. And then I had a WhatsApp with my, like, I guess not squad, but the squad that was there. So that's all I had, and I like didn't open my phone. And then like I think I got back to the village and I was like, oh, I've got a race, because it was morning. It happened in the morning. So it happened about like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I got back to the village about 1 p.m. and had to be back at the pool at 5:30, 6 o'clock. So I was like, and I had to race again that night. So I didn't have much time to process it on the day, but I worked out I was like on a bit of a high. So I opened my phone and it was just like, it was unbelievable. And like, I can remember going into quarantine because I really wanted to get back to all those people that messaged and take the time. I got back to like all of them, and like it took like 8 hours of like just being on my phone. I was like, I've never had an experience like that or since.
Crazy.
Yeah, like the world record was different, I guess, in that regard, because it wasn't randoms. It was the people that like sometimes you look up to. Like I remember getting like a message from some like people. I remember like distinctly getting a message from Nathan Adrian. I was like, I remember like watching him at the Olympics and like admiring him, and like him messaging me and being like, oh, that was really cool. Like really cool to watch you swim.
Wow.
It's like,
that's where it's a bit special to kind of have those sort of people who are just, I mean, the thing, like, in all seriousness, I want to play this clip because, I mean, I've got the ability to play clips because, I mean, this is just absolutely incredible. But let's remind our listeners of that commentary just one more time.
We can all go gobbledygook for Zac Stubblety-Cook.
It was just incredible. But, like, to have that come out of it. But then you've got like Ian Thorpe and Liesl Jones commentating on you as well, which, I mean, that's something which you've got Basil dropping great one-liners, but you've got these legends who are there also talking about your swimming. Do you go back and watch that footage and pinch yourself that you've got Thorpe and Liesl kind of like, you know, talking up your gold medal win as well?
Yeah. I mean, it still doesn't feel real. Like I watch that race and go like, oh, who is that? Like that's probably, you know, something that has been weird to deal with. It's like, it doesn't feel real because at the end of the day for me, like it was like, yeah, it was in the Olympics and yeah, like I felt the sense of occasion, but I was just enjoying myself. Like I was just enjoying swimming for what it was. And like the purity of that experience for me was something that like, you know, I've only experienced it once this year, and that was trials. Like it was just purely the challenge of getting the best out of myself. I guess like some people will resonate, some people that will go straight over their head. But like for me, it was like the pureness of sport in that moment. So for me, everything that happened around it was just unique in that regard, and kind of an extra bonus. But, you know, I've been lucky enough to have chats with Thorpe and have chats with Liesl and Hacky and afterwards, and like have their perspective of then the aftermath of it all. And it's quite interesting. Like it was the Jewel in the Pool was the first time I've experienced like fans as well, which was like, you know, because we've had COVID lockdowns and interstate travel banned, like I haven't necessarily had that experience that say like Mac had or Hacky or Thorpe had during those times.
You didn't get the welcome home parades, things like that. You didn't get to experience any of those, did you?
No. So it was just very different. And like, you know, so the commentary is like the only thing we can relate to previous medals and those kind of things. But yeah, it's indescribable, and like, you know, it's just different.
Had you ever had somebody utter the phrase, let's all go gobbledygook for Zac Stubblety? Like, was that the first time you'd ever heard that?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's unique. Like, you know, we went crazy for that when we were doing on that day during Tokyo. We absolutely loved it because it's so unique. And I will say that kind of to ruin the illusion of scheduling on this show, I interviewed Basil a couple of weeks ago. That won't air for a little bit of time here on the show, but I brought that up and he had mentioned about how this was a phrase that he had always used and he thought, well, this is perfect if he wins gold. So he'd sort of half pre-planned it on the hope that you would win the gold, and you did. So, you know, Basil's frothing at the bit, ready to use this phrase essentially. So I don't know if you get a chance to speak to Basil about it and go, thanks, Basil, that was pretty fun.
Oh, I might mention that next time I see him, though.
Yeah, I'm sure you're rubbing shoulders or that sort of stuff. One thing I actually just wanted to touch on too with it as well. Were you aware going into it, or as much made of the fact that there was such a drought for a male breaststroker to win a gold for Australia? Obviously, since '64, since Ian O'Brien won that gold. Were you aware of that, or was that something afterwards that somebody brought up to you that you'd sort of broken that drought?
I don't think it's been talked about that much. I don't think that many people actually know about it. But yeah, like Tokyo to Tokyo was pretty cool. Like I knew about it beforehand, and I thought one of us would win. I thought Matt or I would like get the best out of ourselves on that day, and like I honestly thought it was Matt, but things happen, and he was there, and he was swimming the way he was swimming. But like I think I knew that someone told me 2 years earlier, but I I wasn't thinking about it during the meet. It was more probably a couple of years beforehand that I'd been told it, and was like, oh, that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, that was one of the best messages I got. Sorry to go back to that, but that was one of the best messages I got. I got a message from him.
I was going to ask, had you talked to him about it actually? So that's
I've never spoken to him. I have his number, but I haven't called him yet. So I do want to like catch up with him because I know he lives in Sydney, or Bathurst, but just outside Sydney. So yeah, like I'd love to actually meet him, sit down with him, talk to him about his Olympic experience and his 200 breaststroke, my 200 breaststroke, and
that'd be
Tokyo
crazy.
to Tokyo would be
a great experience. Yeah, that
podcast ep 1.
There you go. That's you got a listener straight away with that, because I mean it's fascinating when that record sort of came about, because I mean you think swimming, you think Australia, you think we've won it all in all of them, right? I think it was sort of like, so in the backstroke with Kaylee, it was like, wow, this is a record that sort of you think, wow, Australia's never really won many in backstroke before. Which now that you've set this, Zac, now that you've broken through, you've broken this drought. Can we get the kids into breaststroke? Like, is this now like, cool, we've got the Zac Stubblety-Cook effect now that kids are going to be jumping in the pool, bugger the freestyle, bugger the butterfly, bugger the backstroke. We're getting into breaststroke.
Hopefully. We'll see. We'll see in about 10 years. Hopefully, Risen 32.
Hey, sweep the breaststroke in Brisbane, right? Are you going to, 10 years? Is that something home Olympics, do you think?
No. I'll be sitting on the sidelines watching.
You'll be commentating. You'll have the next kid who'll be going, wow, Zac's commentating my race. And I watched his race in Tokyo, which obviously now, Paris, obviously less than 2 years away. I did see another interview with you sort of about sort of that focus, that drive moving forward. But I mean, given that you've got the world record, you've got the Olympic, you've got the Commonwealth, you've got the world, I mean, you've got all these sort of ones off the bucket list. Is the drive just to keep pushing yourself, what you've talked a lot about in this interview, of just doing the best you can do and seeing how far you can take it and push that towards Paris?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's always been the focus, and continually will be the focus. I think it's different because, I had a recipe, I guess, going in, and I was following a process and following a recipe that was based on a few people's race plans, and knowing my strengths and my weaknesses and knowing where I could hold and fold, I guess, in terms of the two breast. Now I go into a position where I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that, but suddenly I'm in the front of the pack, leading the pack of where you're pushing beyond. And I know there'll be other people out there doing the same thing as I'm doing and writing down similar race plans to what I think is possible. So yeah, I think I'm not unaware of that, but it's just a different feeling, I think, and something that last year I was probably fearful of. And I was very lucky that it was actually my nutritionist said to me, she said, don't be scared of that. You should be liberated by your success, because that success doesn't define you, but allows you to be whoever you want to be, and no one can ever take that away from you. It's as simple as that. So for me, that was really powerful and really important for me to realize that I shouldn't be fearful of pushing to the next level. I should be liberated by the success of what's happened prior. So yeah, that's something. It's had to be a different way to look at it, obviously.
It's very inspirational today, Zac. I honestly didn't come into this episode today thinking that I'd be so inspired, but I'm waiting for this podcast. I definitely think you need to get it up and running, because I'd definitely be tuning with everything. Couple of things. We'll wrap it up with a set of fun sort of get to know yourself questions. Always ask our guests on the show what you do with your medals. And obviously, I should have mentioned you got a bronze as well in the mixed relay as well. But do you?
Yeah, no one cares about the bronze. But
let's talk about the bronze. Fuck the gold.
It was the first time it's been in the Olympics too. So it was pretty special to be in that race. I wasn't expecting to go in racing that race, but we ended up racing
We
a lot.
had a lot of. It's funny you mention that because one of our co-hosts on the show, Colin, wasn't the biggest fan of the mixed events, and whereas Jared, our other co-host, and we loved them. I thought they were fascinating, so I'm glad they added them to the Olympics because they were great to watch.
Yeah, it's just a different event, something, and I think like it was really cool to be a part of then dual in the pool this year because they experimented with a few more of those things. So they did like mixed freestyle, which is an event at World Championships and Commonwealth Games. And obviously they did mixed medleys, but they also did able body and para athletes.
Oh, nice.
Which was a really cool. And then they did handicaps based on categorizations, which was really, really cool to see like how that was integrated. So for me, like, I guess at the end of the day, like for me, when you are talking to from a commercial or from a public average Joe's point of view, you go like, well, is the race entertaining? Like, are you willing to tune in again and again? Like,
yeah.
And for me, like, it's not traditional and it's not all of that, but it is really entertaining to watch, like watching based on each country's strengths. That's where you like, that's where you can like play around with male, female, male, et cetera, et cetera.
And then, like, it's the unknown of it too, like as you say, because it's like you might have one event where like you're in the pool up against somebody who's not the best in breaststroke, but then all of a sudden they're putting their butterfly swimmer in and they're going to be so much fun. And like it's just that closing of the gap, and then you hope that they all sort of come together at the wall at the same time, right at the end. Yeah.
So that's like the unique part of it, and it's something different. But I enjoy them, and it's really fun to race them as well. Like you don't have the opportunity to race like with the female team very often. So it's really cool to be able to do that. I think the other thing is really cool and probably not so much a problem for Australia, but like one of my main competitors, Arno, from the Netherlands, they actually don't have enough male athletes to swim a male relay.
Wow.
Like they only have like eight or nine people on the team.
Yeah.
So like their mixed relay is like their one relay they can do.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for those kind of countries that are like pretty decent at swimming and have a few decent athletes, like it's really cool to be able to see them be able to race a team event at a swimming event at the Olympics or Commonwealth Games or wherever it is. So it's actually in that respect too, it's also a little bit more inclusive and a little bit, different.
Helps out. Why isn't there a breaststroke relay? Why can't we have the 4x100, mixed gender breaststroke relay?
I think we'd get a fly or a backstroke relay first, if I'm honest.
Come on. Yeah, who cares about them? And also, where's the 1,500 metre breaststroke? Is that possible?
No, it's possible, but I'm not doing that. No. You have a few crazy people, but I'm not doing that.
I've just seen the distance happen. Actually, the one thing with breaststroke, the whistle, the whole down, up, whistle, down, up, whistle. Is that helpful or is it a hindrance? Like, do you love that or do you fucking hate that?
You can't really hear it, to be fair. Like, you can just hear a whistle. You don't know whether it's for you or for someone else, but my coach doesn't whistle, so I know it's not for me. But it's for your stroke rate. So a lot of our racing, strategy-wise, it's for like a stroke rate. So we'll train often like, this is the rate we need to hit on average for a 200 breaststroke, and this is the time. So then when you're racing, if you're below that rate, that's when you hear the whistle. So like people trying to rev them up.
Makes sense. Here I am, just the dumb fan thinking it's just like the cowbells in alpine skiing. It's just some sort of tradition that the crowd get involved in because it sounds cool. Let's do it. So I just thought it was just people in the crowd going like, like every single time you're stroking, but it actually means something. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The things you learn on this show. The stamp, I mentioned the stamp. Did your mum and dad get like all the stamps and just like, cover them with letters? And do you still sort of get a stamp every now and then with your face? Oh shit, there I am on my bill. There it is.
No, I don't get many letters with it. Ozpost sent me a framed version of the stamps, which was pretty cool. But mum definitely got some. Dad got some and sent me a letter. And then I had like one of my good mates, Sam Williamson, who was at Commonwealth Games. He like sent me a letter congratulating me after the games like with like the whole envelope covered in stamps. And it's like, oh, this is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you sort of expect that because I don't think any Olympian goes into an Olympics and goes, oh, I'm going to win a gold because I want to be on a stamp. Like that's not probably goal number one when you go to an Olympic Games.
No,
You probably don't even realize
quite.
it, do you, until you go, oh, fuck yeah, I want a stamp. Oh, that's odd.
Yeah, well, like Mac was the first person that told me. I had no idea. He's like, oh, so you know you're going to be on a stamp. I was like, what? Like, oh, okay, cool.
Great, cool.
Random, but cool.
I love the weird tradition of that. Like, it's actually really epic to think of different countries and how they honour their Olympic champions. And I think we might be the only country that do it. I don't know. I think in England they get a post box, don't they? I know in London they all got like a gold post box in their hometown. So I don't know if they still do that. Cool. But in certain countries you get lots of money. So
yeah, you get money. There's countries you get given a house. You get given a pension in some countries.
Yep.
That would be very nice.
In some countries, if by winning gold, it just means you stay alive. Because obviously there's unfortunately the other side of the spectrum. But stamps, why not? Let's keep the stamps. Zac, coffee. Talk to me about coffee. Where does this love come from? What should I be drinking? What's the hot coffee right now that people should be getting on board with?
I mean, for me, I love filter coffee. So I typically only have milk coffee if I'm out at like a decent cafe. But yeah, I typically only have a milk coffee when I'm out having a really decent coffee. But at home, I'm always drinking filter. So that's black coffee in a V60 or a pour-over setup. So for me, it's probably the love of the process. So there's a lot of variables that go into coffee. So it's not just grinding coffee and putting it through a machine like a lot of people think. Like there's a lot of variables and a bit of science to it as well. So for me, filter coffee, you can vary water, which is a bit of a rabbit hole you can go down. But you can also do grind size, water temperature, and brew method or brew vessel. And then number of pours. So you're typically just pouring water through coffee. That's the simplest version of it. But the way you pour whether it's number of pours, and the vessel it's in. So you can go from a cone dripper or a flat bottom dripper.
Sounds like a song. Wasn't that a Queen song? Flat bottom dripper?
Yeah, something like that. Flat bottom girls, isn't it?
Yeah, similar, often confused.
Yeah. And then you can also do temperature. So for me, that's where the love comes out of that process and chasing the best cup. I think like tasting really unique coffees all over the world has been fun. I think part of it comes from out of necessity as you go through high school and the end of high school, like not sleeping too much and studying lots and training lots. Caffeine was definitely a necessity. And then you kind of fall into this thing of like, oh, I need to drink coffee out of necessity. And then I kind of was like, well, I want to make it worthwhile. I'd love to drink good coffee. So I started with an AeroPress, and then moved pretty quickly to filter coffee and a good filter setup. And then, and now I haven't really looked back. Like I normally travel with basically a pouring kettle. So that's like a gooseneck kettle that I'll just pour boiling water into, a grinder, a set of scales, a flat bottom dripper because it's metal, so it doesn't break. It's easy to travel with, and a whole heap of filters and all different coffees. So Tokyo, for example, I was pretty prepped. So I had all my coffee frozen in vacuum sealed bags, like 20 gram bags. So I think I had like 10 different coffees, all different flavor profiles.
And that was a barista. Origins. The AOC had a barista. That poor barista, you weren't getting he wasn't serving you at all. You're like, screw you, mate. I've got my own. You should have been the barista. You should have been doing that job.
Not quite. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So for me, like at the Olympics, I had like a special coffee that I was only drinking for finals, which was like, I don't know, it's become a bit of a ritual. Like I have a really high-end or unique coffee that will only be for the finals. So I have something for the heat, I normally have 2 coffees in the afternoon, and that will be the coffee that like goes with me. It's just like, I don't know, sense of occasion.
So it's not something that necessarily helps. It's just like, this is tradition. I'm in a final, so drink my favorite, basically.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like,
Wow.
For example,
You're making me really upset the fact that I just had a cup of Nescafe before this interview, Zach. I think I need to rethink my setup.
yeah, it's a sin. It's a sin.
Sorry, you can hang up now if you want to. I moved up from international roast though, so I will say that.
Fair enough.
Which is good.
Yeah, I think there's an AFL player that does specialty instant.
Oh,
I can't remember his name now. I think he plays for the Demons.
Okay, right.
So,
Mac would like
instant. Yeah, instant coffee is simply just freeze-dried coffee. For anyone that doesn't realize, it's just like either espresso.
It's cheap and easy. That's just what I look at.
Yeah. So typically it's just a black coffee that's just freeze-dried, so dehydrated under cold temperature under a vacuum.
So you're never caught dead drinking instant, basically, unless it's like absolutely have to. Yeah. There's no other choice.
I have they're not very big in Australia, but they're massive in Japan. They have something called coffee parachutes. So basically, like you rip the top off and pour boiling water through coffee still, but like they normally have nitrogen gas in them, so they last like 2 years. So I have like 5 or 6 of them in the car just in case.
Just in case
we run into a situation where we have boiling water, but not a reliable coffee source.
You would have. My mum, I never forget. We, just avid international roast connoisseur, and we'd go out and we'd go to a cafe and you'd get proper coffee. She'd have a sip of it, 2 sips in. Oh, can't wait to go home and have real coffee. It's like, Mum, you are drinking real coffee right now. This is the other way around. But I love the subtleties of it and everything you can do it, because it's just sounds like something. I mean, I looked at your Instagram. You've got a whole section there just on coffee love and everything. So you must be really easy to buy for Christmas then, basically. People are just always buying you different coffee things.
I mean, I'm fairly eccentric too, though, I guess. So I have like niches, I guess. I'm very... Mac calls me the king of niches. He just loves that I like fall into a niche, and I go down a massive rabbit hole. But coffee's been one of them.
Podcasting's for you, Zach. Podcasting is for you. Trust me.
Yeah, coffee's one of them where I've gone down and really stuck to it, because I've found more and more nuance, and the industry is really developing. So, for example, like something that I've had exposure to over the last 2 years is something called infused coffee.
Okay.
So it's been happening a lot in wine. So coffee is actually a cherry. And the way they get that cherry off the coffee dictates a lot of the flavor to the final cup. So you can do everything from just simply washing it off. You can ferment it off, basically in sunbeds. You can put it in a cold chamber. One of the ways they're doing it now is with rice yeast.
Wow.
Those kind of things. So the way you get to the final cup dictates a lot of the flavor. But the infused coffee kind of piggybacked a lot of what wine's been doing for a long time, is like basically getting the yeast that they ferment it with and pre-fermenting that with, say, peaches, passion fruit, strawberry, cinnamon. Really acidic is what they've tried a lot of, because I think there's a fair bit of, without going into too much detail, a lot of what your palate tastes.
This is fascinating, Zach. Bugger the Olympics. This is let's welcome to Off the Coffee Pot right now with Ben and Zach. This is fun.
Yeah. So it's like, a lot of your palate is dictated by acid and those kind of things. So so for me, that's been really interesting, and like introducing people to those things, and they're like, this doesn't taste like coffee. We're in Sydney for Jewel in the Pool, and we went out to a place called the Chinese Country Club. It's amazing little cafe that's just like espresso filter, high-end stuff, but like then a clothes shop. Like, it's really cool. Most comfortable couches ever too as well. So anyone in Sydney, just make sure you go have a look there and stop by. But they have what they call a reserve menu, which is frozen coffees, and I knew they had brute coffee there. And he recently did a peach infusion that was all sold out.
Wow.
I took like Mac and a few others there and was like, try this. It like will blow your mind. And he was like, oh, it tastes like warmed up iced tea, like peach iced tea. He was like, this doesn't make sense. This is coffee. And I think that was one of the things that pushed him over the edge to get a filter set up. But, like we did the same thing in Paris, where like we were out with a few people like Emma, Cody, Mac, Zach and Serdy, and like they had there was a place called Motors, and I knew they had some decent reserve filter menu, and again, frozen coffee that's frozen, and then you just brew it, frozen when it's like peaked. And they just like this, it tastes like lemonade. It's like, it's like, so there's like a lot of nuance in coffee that, you know, that people don't realize, that there is the ability for coffee to taste really unique and really different. So
it's not
that's
the
probably
coffee taste basically that everybody associates it with, right?
Yeah, sometimes the burnt, acrid chocolate, dark, really dark. Like typically all coffee has some chocolate notes in it, whether that's milky or chocolatey or etc. But yeah, like you can have the nuance of a really light roast that tastes really fruity to really Vegemite-y, like really fermenty stuff. So
fascinating.
There's a real broad spectrum, and it's something that's fascinating to me. And I really like drinking diverse range of coffee. So I do freeze a lot. So I probably have about 2 kilos frozen.
Freezer's just always full of coffee, by the way. Where's the chicken? Don't know. Behind the coffee.
in like 20-gram tubes. All like I bought a label maker after this year. I was like, I need to stop handwriting at all. I need to like get
any excuse for a label maker. You've sold me now, Zach. This is like
it's unreal.
I'm always on board for a label maker. That's fascinating. So fascinating. Yeah. That's absolutely critical. I mean, the obvious question: would you start your own roast, or would you start your own like coffee shop?
Maybe we'll see. Maybe by the time this airs, I might have something on the go. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think like I'm doing some what do they call it? Reconnaissance. Mm-hmm. Yeah, reconnaissance, that's the word. At the moment, just to see whether I could do it and whether it's something I'd be interested in. It's definitely like a natural progression in coffee to get into roasting or the competition side of it, but I don't think I'd be quite there for the competition side. I don't think I have enough time to do the competition side, but roasting once or twice a week and just doing really small batch stuff would be really fun, I think, and something that I'd really enjoy.
There's an Olympic sport. If breakdancing is going to be an Olympic sport, where's coffee roasting? That should be out there.
Coffee. There is coffee competitions.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize there's like world championships for coffee competitions and coffee. Well, actually, as we speak, which I'm not sure when this will air, but as we're talking, there's a Melbourne International Coffee Expo.
Wow.
So, which is like, I think there's a competition there. But yeah, there was the Australian champs a couple of weeks ago for the Brewers Cup, and then that's all about flavour. So trying to get the best expression of coffee.
How many Olympic champions have gone on to be world champions in coffee? I mean, there's a goal, Zach. Just saying, you could be the first. You know.
I think it almost takes just about the same amount of work on a world championship brewer. I met the guy not that long ago that got 4th in the world, and he was such a cool guy, Carlos, who works for Toby's estate. And yeah, the amount of work that he said they went into it before and after work whilst working full time, and then also like the expense and everything that to get over there is pretty mind-boggling. Like I think he said they shipped 300 kilos of water.
Wow. Okay. Jeez.
Just water.
So just like, water.
Before, like just because they knew that was the water that like was perfect for the coffee. Like
that's incredible that they have to. Wow, jeez, Zach, you need to start a podcast on this. I'm hooked listening to this. This is like just a different. And again, I'm not going to drink my Nescafe after this interview. I'll do something a little bit different with that. We're going to wrap up.
You're in Hobart. You should go to Born in Brunswick.
I think I know where that is.
North Adelaide.
Yes, because I was going to ask you, was there good coffee in Hobart? Because
down the street, I can't remember the name of it. Down the street from there, there's another one. It's just a little hole in the wall, and it was really cool barista. Everyone knows all the locals. We're both in North Adelaide.
North Hobart or North Adelaide? Are you
North Hobart?
I was going to say it's a bit of a trek to North Adelaide from Hobart, but I mean, there was one that I used to go to when I worked in the city because I'll be honest with you, I haven't lived here for a while, so I'm sort of back here at the moment. But 15 years ago, I'm talking about. I don't even remember the name of it. But for me, it was good coffee, Zach. I don't know. You might take a sip of it and go, well, what the fuck is this? I won't mention that I worked with Starbucks at one point too, because that will probably also make you hang up.
Oh, that's right. At least they're bringing coffee to the world, hey?
Yeah, exactly. We wrap up every interview, Zach, with a set of get-to-know-you style questions. As always, this is a questionnaire that Team Canada gave their athletes ahead of both Rio and Pyeongchang. And as always, a completely optional element. If you're bored today and you want to do some homework, you can draw. There are 3 drawing elements which are completely optional. You can draw a picture of yourself. You can draw a picture of a Canadian animal or an Australian animal, whichever tickles your fancy. And the coolest ever Olympic medal. And I'm using the questionnaire given here to Emily Overholt, and she drew a picture of a pizza as a medal. So don't know if you've ever thought about what an Olympic medal could look different to the one you've already got. It's a nice looking medal. So, yeah.
Very nice looking medal.
Completely. I will say, you worked how many years to get an Olympic medal all that time? I spent $10 on Wish. So, for those watching the video one right now, it's pretty decent. I feel like I could just walk around going, right, hey, look at me, I'm an Olympic champion. Maybe people would believe me, but then they'd probably look at me and realize that I'm full of shit. But anyway, if you know, just saying, if you want to retire and still win an Olympic medal in Paris, you can just buy one off Wish for $10. So, just an idea there. All right, let's start off with the question. First question: the greatest Olympian of all time is Phelps. Easy. Boom. Have you ever bumped? Does he just hang around swimming circles? Do you ever get a chance to bump into him? Or?
No, I've never met him. I'd love to meet him, but yeah, he's an elusive character.
Because obviously Tokyo, the first time since Atlanta that he'd not been at the Olympics. So at least competing, I should say. I don't know if he was there commentating. The first, I think you kind of answered this before. The first Olympics you remember watching was?
I remember watching Phelps in 2008, but I don't think I was all about it. I think, if that makes sense, all over it.
Didn't quite know sort of what you were sort of watching. Have you ever watched, do you get into the Winter Olympics much? Is that something that you sort of get on board with?
Occasionally. I mean, I did enjoy watching, I don't think it was this year's one, it was the one before, which was, interesting to watch. It's just different. It's very, it's pretty cool to watch. I think I like watching the snowboarding and those kind of things that probably can relate a little bit more to. Like some of the other things I've never skied, so I've got no idea.
That's not a transition. You going to the Coffee World Championships before we go to see you in an Olympics in skiing potentially in a few years' time. Your favourite ice cream flavour is?
Oh, that's super hard.
I like to ask the tough ones.
I'm a vanilla guy,
yes.
But not in Hobart, just on the east coast of Tassie, we went to, I can't remember the name of it now, one of the ice creameries, and we had a Leatherwood honey and peach.
Ooh, nice.
And it was unreal. It's nothing I've ever tasted before.
Was this in a town, or was this kind of, you had to go off a highway, you saw a sign advertising ice cream?
We were in a place called near Mole Creek.
Okay, right.
Near Cradle Mountain.
Because I know on one of my favorite places to go when I'm on the East Coast, it's just sort of, you see this sign out of nowhere. It's ice cream next 200 meters or something. So you turn off, it's a little farmhouse and they've got an ice cream shed and really good ice cream.
It's across the road. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's across the road from Raspberry Hill.
Right.
Farms.
Okay. There you go. I'm a big vanilla ice cream fan. I think vanilla ice cream.
If you can do vanilla well, you can do. You can do it all well, right?
Absolutely. Now you kind of, with the way you walk out onto the pool deck now, you sort of get that nice fancy introduction. I don't know if you get music with it though. So if you were a baseball player, your walk-up music would be, I don't know. Do you have a song that you walk out onto the pool deck with?
I think it varies each meet. I think before the Olympics and a lot of this year, I was a lot into Kanye West and No Church in the Wild with his Jay-Z album. But then I think later in the year, I got into Childish Gambino, a song called Bonfire, which is just if anyone knows that song, it's quite aggressive.
Okay.
It's just a very angry music song and something that I think I was just channeling at that point, just getting angry and up before I race, because I think we got quite numb to racing. It just varies.
I was thinking when you said bonfire, I was thinking of that knife party song that they use in Breaking Bad that everybody hates that scene. I fucking love that scene, but different genres of music there. In a movie about your life, who would play you?
Oh, that's a tough one too. I don't know. I don't know many actors, to be fair, though.
Yeah, you can play yourself.
What's his name from? No. That's a hard no. What's his name? He's in Looper, the main character in Looper.
Oh, yep.
That guy.
That guy.
Him or the Rami Malek.
Oh, yes. That's a good one. Yeah, I can see that. Trying to see here if I can just, this is the joys of podcasting where I could probably edit this out, but I'm not going to because I'm lazy. Looper, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That's the guy that we are all thinking of right now, of course. Oh, Bruce Willis. I mean, maybe Bruce. No. Not quite going
there. We're good.
Yes. Your guilty pleasure snack is, and don't say coffee because that's not guilty. You're proud and out with that one.
I'm a big fan of croissants, like a good croissant at a cafe, or in Brizzy there's something called Holy Crumpets, and they're like crumpets like the size of a piece of toast, but like
nice,
thick as 2 pieces of toast. They're unreal.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, one of those 2 things would probably make guilty pleasure. But actually, in Hobart, in Launceston, there's a place called Bread and Butter.
Okay. I don't often frequent that city because as a southerner, we don't often go north much. But if I'm there
very good
reasons against my will, I will check it out.
Yes, had a walnut croissant from there.
Nice.
Which was unreal.
Had you been to Tasmania before, or was it your first time visiting?
First time, which was awesome. Loved it.
This is a thing I love about people coming here now, because 10 years ago, you'd say, I'm from Tasmania, they'd scoff at you. Ugh, why would I go there? Now, it's like everybody's wanting to come here all the time. It's like it's strange to have people actually wanting to come here. So,
yeah, I don't think it's for everyone, though, to be fair. Like, I think if you like the big cities, I don't think it's for you. Mm-hmm. But if you enjoy the countryside and enjoy seeing farm to table produce, and the ability to go see the farm or drive past the farm, or sometimes have like farm sheds where you can go in, that is what it's all about.
Exactly. Did you do Mona? I'm guessing you did Mona.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I was a little disappointed with Hobart.
Really? With Hobart in general. Okay.
I really enjoyed the rest of Tassie, but Hobart were like, we could have probably spent less time here. And
can I ask what it was particularly about Hobart that you didn't enjoy?
I don't know. I don't want to offend the Hobart.
It's all right. Both of us are listening. It's all good. We're here. I've spent my entire life being mean to my home city, Zach, so you're not going to offend me. It's all good.
I think it was just like, for me, for example, here's an example first. Sydney is a big city.
Yep.
Melbourne is a big city. Mm-hmm. And they're not trying to be a small town. Hobart was trying to be a big city, but it's a small town. That's like a small city.
I would agree with that, because it's the Mona effect, Zach. I would just say that. And the fact that, I was living away for a few years, and you come back and you literally go into places and you're like, why do I feel like I'm trying to be in Melbourne right now? This doesn't feel right. And it's never always been like this. So yeah, it's I did enjoy it.
There's some good spots definitely there, but I think like I don't know if I could see myself living there, but I could see myself living like Bishno Way or those kind of places are really, really beautiful and like got enough there that you can live.
It's Shane Gould lives in Bishno. I didn't know if if you're caught up with Shane. Is that like a thing, like Olympic gold medalist or Olympic gold medalist? You go rub shoulders with her. She's a Survivor player now, of course, Survivor winner. So maybe she's forgotten her Olympic roots. The most recent TV show that you binge watched is?
I hadn't watched Big Mouth until recently.
It's good, isn't it?
Which was quite good to watch. Yep. Very funny. Obviously, I've been keeping up with House of Dragon and the Lord of the Rings prequel. Mm-hmm. So that's been a lot on my plate as it is. So, there's a couple of hours a week already.
Yeah. There's always so much, so isn't it? It just never ends. You think you've caught up on something and then something else comes on and you're just like, oh God, like
Yeah, and then my partner, she hasn't seen Vampire Diaries. And I've like watched it
Wow.
a few times now. So I was like, oh, I think we should watch it again.
See, this is where on one of our other podcasts we just finished covering Lost, and I'm a big Ian Somerhalder fan, and I actually had a Boone from Lost t-shirt. So if I had known that, I could have been sitting here with a Boone Ian Somerhalder shirt there to the Vampire Diaries love going on there. Never thought I'd wear that on Off the Podium. What is your biggest fear in life? Oh, let's get deep here, Zac. Your biggest fear in life?
I think my biggest fear in life is regret, I think. And it's pretty deep, I guess, and philosophical, like the regret that I won't live life to the fullest. And I often find myself itching if I'm just sitting at home doing nothing. I find myself itching to get out and do something, and not necessarily conquer the world, but get out and do something. So that's probably my biggest fear.
This episode has gone a lot deeper than I thought it would be, so I think you're on the right page there. Growing up, who was your favourite sports team?
Oh, I think I was a big Socceroos fan. And obviously, like growing up when Socceroos were playing really well with like Tim Cahill and that whole crew, that was obviously like a big part. And then like I think growing up in Queensland, probably don't have it as much in a Tasmanian sense, but you grow up a lot with NRL, and just by osmosis hear about NRL. And then obviously with Darren Lockyer and Origin and stuff, you definitely get around it at that time. And then I think I followed a lot more. I followed a bit of AFL because Dad was from Victoria.
Who's his team? Who's his team, Zac?
You don't want to know.
Yeah, I do. I definitely do.
Who's a Collingwood supporter?
Oh, well,
I told you.
Thanks for joining us, Zac. As a Carlton supporter, I'm still very dirty over that 1 point loss recently. So,
well,
you know.
My uncle, he's a Carlton supporter.
Oh, your uncle's a smart man. There you go.
Carlton supporters. But then my granddad was a Geelong supporter, and so was my auntie. So there's a full spectrum down south.
It's
in Victoria.
Definitely that way. So you don't then transition over to like the Lions or something when you're in Brisbane, or is it?
I've been following the Lions a bit, and was lucky. Went to the Lions Richmond game.
Nice,
which was really, really, really cool to see. Yeah.
I lived in Brisbane for a little bit, and I went to a bunch of Lions. I actually got more on the Suns train just because I liked Metricon, and I ended up somehow in the cheer squad, and it was just fun being with this sort of like group of people who, you know, you get there and you're like, oh, I've got a confession to make. I'm a Carlton supporter. And I'm like, that's all right. I'm a Sydney supporter. She's a, Geelong supporter. She's a St Kilda supporter. We're here because we're supporting our team and we want this to work on the Gold Coast. So it's kind of like a nice little community atmosphere on like a bigger scale. So I love the what they do with football in both Brisbane and the Gold Coast. It's better than, it's not as good as Melbourne, but it's probably the best I've experienced outside of Melbourne.
Yeah. It's just different, I guess, because in Sydney you have a lot more NRL supporters and cricket. I guess the AFL probably don't get as much love in Sydney, but they do have two teams now, and they have a team in the grand final, so hopefully that will progress them a bit more. And obviously the Lions and the Suns are getting better and better each year, and the Lions definitely re-sparked that AFL in Queensland. You
would have been, what, like 2 or 3 when they were doing the three-peat, right? So I don't think you'd probably remember that. But,
I remember after that, like Michael Voss and Jason Ackermanis and those big household names. And, it's funny how it's all coming back, though, like the mullets and the blonde hair. And
it's weird. Have you attempted to grow a mullet? Is there mullets and swimming?
No.
Is this like a thing?
I mean, Matt Temple rocks for a long time, but no, it's not as much.
Streamlining, I think, like aerodynamically, it probably wouldn't help underneath the old swim cap, maybe, or
I don't know.
I'm thinking.
I don't think
Cam Smith in golf has started them. Like it's insane how it's coming back. That's another story. All right, last question for you, Zac. What is one thing? I might know the answer to this. What is one thing you can't live without?
I mean, I actually think I could live without coffee.
Okay.
Because when I was in Tassie, I was only having 1 a day.
Oh,
not my usual 4.
Cut down, Zac. Well done.
Yeah, I did it. I did better and got rid of the headaches, got rid of the morning coffee headaches. So, yeah, maybe coffee, but I don't know. I think I struggled without sun for a long time. I think that's something I would struggle if I went to Tassie, the Queensland sun.
Yes. And it burns you a little bit more down here because we're closer to the ozone hole rather than the humidity, which when I lived in Queensland, God, it was winter and people were like, oh, it's freezing. It's like 19 degrees and like 60% humidity. What are you complaining about? Spend a winter in Tassie and tell me what you think about cold then. Zac, it's been so much fun learning everything about your career and everything outside of it too. So fascinating. Could talk to you for so long about everything with that. If people want to follow you sort of between now, Paris, beyond, Instagram, social media, do you have a coffee blog? I mean, come on, I feel like you need to have something coffee related out there.
Not yet. We'll see. We'll see what happens over the next little while. But yeah, I mean, the best place is Instagram. That's where most of my journey is published and most of my journey happens. And hopefully I can get a few things off the ground and get a bit more of that journey out there and hopefully pursue a bit more of the passion outside of swimming as well.
Well, we'll be keeping an eye. I've got to play this one more time because I never get a chance to do this. Basil,
We can
come
all
on.
go gobbledygook for Zac Stubblety-Cook.
It gets me excited every time I hear that, Zac. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show, mate. And we'll be keeping an eye on between now and Paris and beyond. And we'll get you back on with a couple more gold medals around your neck and a few more coffee blogs and podcasts between now and then too.
Too easy. Thank you very much for having me.